Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CPG Guys podcast. I'm PVSB, aka the Pepperoni Pizza CPG Guy, and my subject matter expertise revolves around the digital shelf, content, retail, customer data, insight, CRM, and loyalty. My co-host, he's the Veggie Pizza CPG Guy, and an expert at branding, direct-to-consumer enablement, unified commerce, retail media, and marketplaces. Please join me in welcoming the man with one name, Sri. Sri, how you doing today?
Doing awesome, Peter. Sunny, 75-degree day in New York City. Can't complain. And since the world is going down the path of plant-based and impossible burgers, I think veggie pizza is perfectly okay for me.
You know, Sri, you and I may disagree on the ingredients, but I know one thing we agree on: where to get the pizza. Sri, what's our favorite pizza place?
New Haven is where these places are located. We did a bunch actually on a previous episode that's on IGTV, and it is called Pepe's Pizza. No
Frank
debate,
Pepe's,
hands
man.
down.
Frank Pepe's is where it's at. Nothing wrong with Sally's, but Pepe's is just a cut above. Before we get to our guest, I want to remind our audience that all of our content, including our series on profitability, our women's leadership series, where we were able to help contribute $8,000 to the Susan G. Komen Foundation, our founder series from Q1, all that's for free. Just go to cpgguys.com. You can find it there. And as you know, we say this all the time, our podcast is audience driven, which means the content we showcase is based upon the feedback you give us. You tell us what you want us to talk about and who you want us to invite on. And we take that seriously and try and do it. Best way to get that message to us, go to ratethispodcast.com/CPG Guys and leave a review there. And if you're at it, maybe just a 5-star rating if you're so inclined. We like 5, Sri. I like 5. You like 5? 5. He likes 5. Anyhow, we really do want the review. We want you to tell us what you're looking for. So please take a little time and do that. So on to the main event. Our guest today is Managing Director at RBC Capital Markets, where he oversees the coverage of the beverage and household personal care sectors. It totally covers companies that have total market capitalization of almost $1 trillion. And for the last 15 years, he's been ranked one of the top CPG analysts. You probably know him from some appearances on networks like CNBC, where he talks about this space. Please join Sri and me in welcoming to the podcast, Nick Modi. Nick, greetings. How you doing today?
I am doing great, and I think this fits just perfectly because when I order my pizza, I get half pepperoni, half peppers, onions. Let's go, boys.
Oh, man, that is what we ordered. You are reading our minds. This is brilliant.
That's what I do. I like a little bit of both, so I need to get it all in there.
Nothing wrong with that. That's how Sri and
That's
I
what he
do it.
does for a living, Peter. It's not a surprise. He reads minds.
Okay. Hey, Nick, we got this multitasking audience. That's why we moved from being purely video-based to audio-based, so that they can, browse and see things while they're listening. Can you tell our audience where they might go online to learn more about your business, and then give us a brief overview of it and the role you play?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Nick Modi. I am the stock analyst at RBC Capital Markets, which is the largest Canadian investment bank. And I have a research distribution list where I publish on the industry. Again, I follow basically every sector: tobacco, packaged food, household personal care, beauty, beverage, non-alc, and alc. So I do a lot of pretty prolific. So if you'd like to be included on my distribution list, feel free to reach out to the CPG guys, and they'll get in touch with me, or you can reach me out directly. But that's how they can find me and see my work.
We'll definitely put some links in the liner notes of this podcast for people to be able to find you. So that's very helpful. And thank you for opening the door. You mentioned that RBC is a Canadian enterprise. It's part of Royal Bank of Canada. I'm a Canadian. I love being able to talk about my home and native land. I'm very proud of it. My mother is a recipient of the Order of Canada. So it is with great pleasure that I'm able to help promote your business and invite you on here. So thank you, Nick, for joining. Enough about
Thanks for
that.
having me.
Let's kind of get to the questions because we've got some really interesting ones. I'm going to kick this off, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts. Some people think of as the holiday season as Christmas when they get all their big presents. For me, I get my presents through knowledge, and that's in February. That's when the annual CAGNY conference takes place. CAGNY, for those of you who don't know, Consumer Analyst Group of New York. I assume that you kind of look forward to this kind of event. I'd sure love to know what role you play in prepping for this, when it's a physical event, actually going there, and how do you leverage the event? Is there some, and also when you think about all these consumer goods companies that are presenting, because they're usually like 30, 35 a year, what you look for in a very good presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously this year was a little different because it was virtual.
Yep.
So, it was all the stuff you would expect: digital, and more digital, and tough comparisons and innovation. But, usually the way I participate in CAGNY is I'm an audience member. I get to interact with the executives that I know and I follow and I speak to at least once a quarter. So it's good to see everyone face to face. Grab a drink at the bar after all the presentations are done to talk about the business. So it's a nice kind of environment to get everyone together to just talk casually and business. So it's a good event. I'm sad it was virtual, of course, but hopefully next year we'll get back to the real live event.
Obviously, it's an event you look forward to every single year. And you're there and you work with the executives, as you said, you have relationships with, and you're an audience member. But this year was special because you've already mentioned in a previous question, digital. You said the word thrice: digital, digital, digital. Peter and I noticed that some presentations, digital, digital, digital was the way. But we also found some where there was no mention of digital, e-commerce, connected commerce, unified commerce, call it what you may. What are your general impressions on that piece coming out of CAGNY? And what does digital mean to a financial analyst that's leading a segment like you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, look, quite frankly, if I could be really just straight up, CAGNY to me was somewhat of a snooze fest, because I feel like the companies are talking about the same thing year in, year out. What I would like to hear is I would have loved to be at CAGNY 5 years ago hearing this year's CAGNY, right? Because I think a lot of these companies were behind where they needed to be. They were caught short when the pandemic hit and the surge online, and they weren't prepared. And so what it means to me is that this industry, though getting better, needs to really start being a bit more forward thinking in terms of the capabilities they need to compete and thrive and survive in the future. That is my thing. And that's why when the whole 3G thing was happening several years ago, I was doing this almost on every conference call, because you cannot prepare for the future when you're cutting your investments. It just doesn't work. So that's kind of how I come out on this whole topic of digital. I mean, the bottom line for me is it's sticky, right? A lot of what happened in the last 12 months is going to remain with us, and it's only going to grow from there. I mean, I'll give you a quick story. Coming out of Rutgers University in the late 90s, my first job was being an associate on the e-commerce team. It was this company called Amazon. They sold books. You might have heard of them. They weren't making much money. And I remember back then people talking about how the internet was going to change everything and no one would ever go to retail again. And that never happened. It took time, right, for e-commerce to get the penetration it has to, and it's still very low on a relative basis, especially for CPG. That's changing now. Everyone's catching up. And what happened during the pandemic is that the boomers figured it out. They figured out how convenient buying online is, and that's where you're going to have a lot of stickiness.
In a prior question, you mentioned the fact that the pandemic had a tremendous impact upon how people went shopping, particularly in consumer goods. People now are staying at home more. They're not eating at the office. They're not using the restaurant the restrooms at the office. They're not going out at night, or at least certainly not in the Northeast where it was really cold. But in any event, that had a major impact upon the growth of both e-commerce sales and, for grocery, brick and mortar sales. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective on, as we emerge from this pandemic into what is a post-pandemic world, what do you see as being the effect on different channels, including direct-to-consumer, the growth of incredible marketplaces like Instacart and Drizzly, and even third-party marketplaces like Walmart and Amazon, and then particularly for the consumer goods that are selling in through those channels? Like, how are you counseling them? Sri and I have both been in the sales side, and the thing we've been talking about is, God, I would hate to be in a position to have to forecast for the comp year. Love to know your thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So look, I think, first of all, if you go back pre-pandemic, people are already starting to stay at home, especially some of those younger consumers, right? Why? We actually started tracking this after 9/11 happened in 2001, where people started cocooning all the way back then. We saw a big spike in home theater sales. Like this has not been something that was created by COVID-19. This was happening prior. COVID just accelerated it. Okay. So people are already starting to stay home prior to the pandemic for a variety of reasons. Safety, the ubiquity of information. We now know geopolitically how safe it is in certain markets outside of the US, and that gets into our psyche. Digital engagement, right? Facebook, Hulu, Netflix, less reason to go out. You can communicate with your friends via FaceTime, right? So all of that was already manifesting itself, okay? Pandemic accelerated. So as we move forward, okay, I think there are a few things. Number one, people just are comfortable in their homes. Look at Home Depot and Lowe's same-store sales growth. People have invested lots of their resources and money into their homes, and they want to get a return out of it. But work from home, even if it's go back to the office 4 days a week, that one day can add up to a big dollar figure when multiplied across the country, right? And you think about breakfast and lunch, two occasions where it's a grab and go type situation, and now you're actually creating full meals. That's a lot of dollars that weren't coming into the mass and food and grocery system, right? So I think that's going to be one of the longer lasting manifestations, is that you will have more people staying at home, more people enjoying their homes, and that was already a trend that was happening prior. Now, when I think about suburbanization, right, we had this urbanization where people were going to center city to get job opportunities. Well, guess what happened during the pandemic? People figured out they could do their jobs pretty much anywhere. And now you're seeing, the data would show you're seeing a mass migration out of cities and into suburban areas. So think about what that means for retailers that have a heavy footprint in urban centers. That changes the calculus a little bit, okay? And it also, you have more pantry space, more closet space, so you're going to have more inventory, right, in your home as a house of 4 or 5 versus an apartment. Millennials are now in their home forming years and their family forming years, so that also is going to drive more suburbanization. Okay, so those are some of the longer lasting implications, I think, from COVID. When you think about the comparison, and I would just get on the soapbox as a guy who analyzes stocks for a living and questions CEOs for a living, the temptation to somehow create this, less bad comparison period scenario, right? Where it's like, well, I don't want to be down 10%. Maybe let's try to get down 5%. The reality is, don't ruin your business or your brands to try to comp up 30 from a year ago. Make smart decisions. The stock market already knows you have tough comparisons. That's why all of these stocks are literally trading today where they were before the pandemic even happened. So they got no credit for the up 30 because everyone knows it's going to be down again. So my advice, my advisory to all of you out there listening, you general managers that might feel pressure that you need to, optically create this smoother soft landing, don't make poor decisions for your business longer term.
Obviously, the pandemic, in a previous question, you already addressed again that it had a major impact in the consumable space, especially as restaurants have been closed and all the surrounding facilities around, with the pandemic happening, consumption generally in out of home has significantly declined, period, not just in consumables, but many other categories as well. Love your perspective on what you're thinking about post-pandemic, including the role of direct to consumer. And then now for the first time, several marketplaces have really taken off. Drizzly is one of them. Instacart is one of them. Of course, Walmart and Amazon have always had a marketplace, There are many more sellers than there were about a year ago. What is your general advice for post-COVID?
Yeah, look, you have to become involved in these marketplaces. You have to figure out a way to get more direct to consumer. And this is the trick. So there's a lot of layers to this. So let me just try to break them down. When Keurig and Dr. Pepper merged, everyone questioned it. What are they doing? Why? That makes no sense. But it made perfect sense if you thought about it. Because what they realized is that share of stomach is share of stomach. And where a consumer buys their beverage, you want to be everywhere that they would buy a beverage. So why not get into the home? Why not be part of that daily morning occasion that most people consume coffee? It made perfect sense. When Coca-Cola purchased Costa, everyone said, well, what are they doing? Why would they want to get in the retail business? They were getting into the direct-to-consumer business, okay? So, or Pepsi and SodaStream, okay? So the reality is this is something that some companies were early on, but they haven't scaled it, obviously, right? I mean, SodaStream's still small. Costa is just one retailer, and it's in a certain part of the country, of the world. So I think that CPG companies need to be a lot more aggressive in making sure that they are somehow connecting with their consumer at home outside of a traditional Amazon, for instance, because Amazon won't share the information with the CPG companies, right? So how do you do that? Okay, you can get onto some of these platforms. Could we see some really unique partnerships or alliances where a CPG company partners or buys a content platform, right? Like, why wouldn't, let's say, a Coca-Cola partner with more e-gaming or e-sports companies? You have this rich content and you have all this traffic, and then you can use that as an e-commerce opportunity as well, right? That would make sense. But having a bunch of direct-to-consumer stores for different categories doesn't make any sense, because a consumer doesn't want to go to multiple stores. They want to go to one or two, right? Unless it's a really customizable proposition like you have in the beauty category, where you can actually select and customize your own makeup or skincare product. Okay, so I think direct to consumer is going to be here with us. It's going to be a much bigger deal, and the CPG companies have to figure out a way to get involved, but still learn in the process on what their consumers are doing so they can make better choices.
What are some of the new go-to-market innovations that are intriguing you in consumer goods and the retailing sector? I mean, there's just so many fascinating things. I'd love to know what's kind of got your attention in terms of how it can be transformative to the industry.
Yeah, and this is one of the things I was talking about, like with CAGNY, right? Here we are talking about online and e-commerce and DTC when we should have been talking about that 5 years ago. What I would have liked to hear at this CAGNY was how companies are thinking about how they would operate with Neuro, right? Which was formed by a Google engineer. It's an autonomous vehicle. It's basically last mile delivery. It's used in Europe actually already. This little car has its own lane on the highway. It's autonomous. It brings your products to your home. It facially recognizes you. It opens up. You take your product, you close it, and Neuro goes back to its micro fulfillment center or the retailer. Or what about the patent that was filed for the Amazon floating warehouse that would deliver product to you via drone? Or how about what's going on with McDonald's and their drone test out in San Diego delivering to the consumer? There's so many, or RoboMart, which allows you to pick your vegetables fresh right yourself. You don't have to rely on someone else to do it, or don't have to go to a grocery store to do it. There's just so many innovations that are out there. And I just don't know how the CPG companies I follow are going to interact with these different modes of distribution and go to market, right? So these are the types of things that I think all of these CPG companies need to start thinking about. They're not ubiquitous today, but neither was the iPhone in 2007. It didn't take very long. It took 2.5 years for the iPhone to literally change the world for mass adoption, change the way we communicate, change the way we process information, the way we get information, right? I mean, you just think about it. It took 46 years for electricity to get mass adoption. It took 2.5 years for the iPhone to get mass adoption.
Given GDPR, CCPA, and other privacy initiatives in countries like Canada and South Korea, what do you see as being the future of consumers' access and even control of their own data, and the impact that'll have on manufacturers and retailers that are trying to market to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 points I would make. First, I absolutely believe that we should create an online bill of rights. for every citizen in the world. You can opt in or out, right? You can make your own decision, but you have the rights. No one has the rights over you. So that's number one. That's something that needs to happen at the global level. The second thing I would say is, for young men like us, okay, we might be worried about privacy. I don't want an Alexa or an Echo anywhere near my house. Okay, that's just my preference. But when you look at the younger consumers, okay, they don't care. All the research would suggest that Pew Research has done and others have done. They are more than happy to exchange their information for convenience, for customization, right? For better user experience. And so, and think about it, these consumers, their entire life is online. They grew up with Facebook already being in existence, right? So the reality is, when you think about privacy, for us and all the CPG executives that might think like us, that, we're worried about privacy, these younger consumers, the future consumer, doesn't really care. And so that's why I think we have to really start thinking about data and how all of us can really understand the data that's out there, so we can really understand the infrastructure we need to make better choices for our spend based on the data, right? I don't see that happening right now.
How do you view the future growth in this space? There's so many fulfillment models that exist: click and collect, pure play, direct to consumer, home delivery, deliver to a location, lockers. Any concerns, anything right up there on your mind in terms of fulfillment and how this is going to play itself out? And are you actually conscientiously looking at it or tracking it?
Shri, I am paying a lot of attention. That's why I keep on speaking about these go-to-market innovations, because they're not ubiquitous today, but they will be. And I'm not sure the CPG industry, brand or retailer, is ready to interact with some of these go-to-market innovations, right? And so I absolutely believe that the capabilities must be developed today, right? So we don't have a situation like COVID where all of a sudden something surges and the companies aren't ready. The retailers aren't ready. They're not resourced for it, right? And so that's why I really think it's important to make this point.
What do you see as being the engagement model for brands and retailers going forward? I guess the question I'm asking is, you mentioned that the brands were caught off guard, the retailers were caught off guard. Are there specific other missed opportunities you see that are going to be critical for the success of a consumer engagement model going forward?
Absolutely. I think this convergence of the digital and physical world that we're already seeing in terms of, think about this, the gravity of the decision-making process for the consumer has gone out of brick and mortar, not fully, but is transitioning into the home. So think about that, the manifestation, the implication of that. That is a serious situation, okay? Now, when you think about the way to engage a consumer, okay, let me give you an example. Fortnite, which is a popular video game that my son plays with his friends online, had a concert with Travis Scott, which is a famous hip hop rap artist. Okay, it was a 1 hour concert, all digital. Travis Scott had an avatar. It was all on the video game, and I watched it with him, and it was incredible. I mean, incredible. Okay, 12.8 million people worldwide tuned into this. Not a single brand was represented. Now, think about, and not to single out a company, but think about PepsiCo, for instance, and how they spend money on MSG, Madison Square Garden, for the pouring rights, or any other company that has stadium rights. 21,000 people, maybe, on a good day. And you have a lot of representation there. So all I'm saying is we have to counterbalance the digital and physical, because that's where the consumer is migrating. That's where they're spending a lot of their time. Okay. And think about Samsung. They just launched a patent several years ago for a virtual and augmented reality contact lens, which will effectively allow you to image a retail aisle on any surface at any time. And over time, it'll get customized to your preferences based on artificial intelligence. How do you engage a consumer if you're a large CPG company that way? So these are the capabilities that need to be built right now.
Purpose and performance, two very important words way beyond the Webster's dictionary. How do you view these as you think about stocks and as you think about companies and things of that nature? And how do you expect companies to connect the dots on these? And then how do you actually reward companies for purpose?
Yeah, look, to me, it's all about the people. Can you get the best people? That's why the CPG industry was so dominant decades ago before high tech started taking a lot of the talent, right? It's all about having the right people. And when you have a very clear purpose and mission, that's what helps you get those people. But it also helps you align an organization around a strategy, right? If a company's purpose is to keep the environment safe, let's say you're Clorox, okay? Keep the environment safe for healthy living, right? That's not exactly the purpose. I'm just using this as a generic example. That people can align around that. And you can actually build a business model and strategy around that. So to me, it's, we tend to overcomplicate these things. Purpose aligns everyone within the organization around a strategy. And if you have the right purpose, then you can recruit the right people.
I want to remind our audience that all of our content, our audio podcast, our videos, our documents, a link to some of the podcasts that we like to listen to, it's all available for free. Just go to cpgguys.com. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, please give us your feedback. We want to know what you'd like us to cover. Do that by going to ratethispodcast.com/CPGguys and leave us a review and a rating there. That would be tremendous. Nick, Shri and I are incredibly grateful for you joining us today. It was very informative to both of us. We appreciate the perspective that you bring. You spend your time analyzing in these CPG companies, talking to their leaders, and you bring a very honest perspective to that. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, gentlemen, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick.
We're going to put a link to Nick's LinkedIn profile in the liner notes. You'll find them there, along with a link to RBC Capital. Shri, I love this. This was really informative. We got to talk some of our favorite topics today.
Absolutely. I can't wait to get it out.
And we're also going to put this out in IGTV in our 1Q1A series. So you'll get it as a podcast episode, and you can also see the videos in IGTV. So to our audience, we're grateful that you join us for each episode, and we look forward to you joining us on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye. The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.